Kite and Black Rose drop onto Kubia, and instead of the platform the last 3 battles have been on, the team fight on Kubia itself. Despite fighting on its body, Kubia's whole host of abilities can still strike at the team. New this time is Saddam's Curse, which acts similar to Legion's Reach and Jihad. Abaddon's Terror, which deals party-wide status ailments that vary from party member to party member, and Armageddon, which can wipe an unprepared team. You'll need to destroy 4 cores before you reach Kubia's heart.
I guess it's not running away.
Fine, then let's settle this.
However, there's one problem with destroying the source that holds nearly 10,000 hit points, and that is Kubia's last ability, Saphira Returner, which can regenerate its health nigh infinitely. And it would not be a matter of waiting for it to run out of skill points or casting Data Drain to get around it. Kubia, at least now, does not Protect Break, and if we were aware of what skill points it does have, odds are Saphira Rebirth would regenerate those as well. This thing is legitimately worse than the One Sin. Sure, that monstrosity is annoying as it keeps switching elemental alignments as a Wonder God ability, but every time you would near killing Kubia, however, it will just keep coming back stronger, spawn Gamora, and slam the team with ever stronger variants of its specials. And so to beat it, a sacrifice must be made.
Black Rose! Strike my bracelet!
You want me to do what? Hey, what the hell are you saying?
Just to take us out of this moment and indulge in a bit of reality towards the storytelling. The world, and for that matter the .hack games, do not possess an item wear or break dynamic such as in some games like World of Warcraft. And for that matter, the Twilight Bracelet is an item written into Kite's character data, one that Leos has repeatedly failed to delete, and Morgana wasted a multitude of her phases to try and destroy. What the hell is Black Rose, a common heavy blade, going to do? Why strike it with her broadsword, of course? Personally, I think this was only possible because Kubia was present, and the area they were in was being overtaxed by processing limitations. Kubia and the bracelet are connected by the same coding, and with the overtaxed processing, the system would be tricked into directing damage to a nondescript item that normally doesn't have damage resistance. As items have no hit points, it results in catastrophic failure, and with the bracelet decompiling, the string to Kubia is cut, and it self-destructs. I am well aware I have no idea what the hell I'm talking about when it comes to how games are coded, how data is processed, how servers handle and commit their processing power within the universe the series is playing out in. And I sure as hell know this would never work in the real world to deal with something like this. I may be entirely wrong with how I explained how the hell Black Rose managed to destroy the bracelet, but I remind you all this is a world where epileptic seizures caused by a gaming headset can cause people to have their consciousness pulled out of them, leaving their bodies comatose, while errant data files that run a video game can cause catastrophic failure of electronic systems on a worldwide scale. With that in mind, my version of how the bracelet is broken makes more sense than any bill concerning the internet America's government has proposed in the last 20 years. If you have a better one, please feel free to speculate. GU had better crisis resolution. This kind of is a legitimate plot hole. Still, I will get the writers and animators credit. The destruction of the bracelet was very dramatic, there appearing to be no other choice to get rid of Kubia. But with the bracelet destroyed, they won't be able to use it to defeat the final phase. And so, Helba calls everyone to Netslum. But before the meeting begins, gather the party you'll want for the final battle, and restock your items, cause at this point, there will be no turning back. Kite reports on the bracelet's loss, Wise Men musing on a line from the epitaph that sparks something in Kite's head on Harold's words and the dual meaning of twilight, that it can refer to dusk, leading to night, and dawn, a new day, an end, and a beginning.
If Harold designed this world based on epitaph of daybreak, then would he have prepared an end where the world is destroyed by the wave?
I see. So we may find our chance there.
It is darkest before the dawn. That's what Harold said. I want to believe him.
It's all speculation, of course, but with only one phase left, if they win, everything would be over. Leos offers them all an out, but no one leaves. Too late, too, as the cursed wave hits Netslum, and thus comes forth the rebirth, Korbanik. Korbanik, like the others, appears to have infinite health, but just keeps striking at it. Like Magus, it releases seeds that double as bombs you can destroy to avoid damage, but their area is limited, so it may just be better to run from them and keep striking the main body. It can also cast Fajuk Rom, so a high wood tolerance would also be a good idea. Deal 10,000 damage, and its seed form will change into that of a spreaded leaf, with Korbanik's second form having a whole host of new abilities. On top of more wood spells is also a paralysis spell, Malicious Quickening, which hits a party member multiple times, Cruel Exploitation, which drains the health of another to death, and Fierce Flash, which mass casts Phyridon on the party. As you near the depletion of most of its health, Korbanik will finally invoke its phase powers and give itself damage immunity, but keep slamming it with damage, as eventually another cinematic will cut in, or arriving along with everyone who's been trapped in the game. They collectively slam into Korbanik, cracking the barrier, which the trio breaks open. But with its defense down, Korbanik reveals its true form, a Petal Eye. This Korbanik can spawn minions called Hellseekers and has 2 attacks. Grand Complication, which fires layers at reflections of itself, hitting the victims from all sides, and Vivid Purification, that is a charge shot variant of it. And as its prior forms couldn't cast it, Data Drain now returns with the force of a sledgehammer. Once you get its health down to about half, another complication arises in the cutscene. The strain on the servers is too much, and Korbanik is causing them all to crash. Helba's server dies, but they'll save by actions I'll cover next time, as it really was the result of the actions taken by Jun, Mai, Yuki, and Kyoko that the battle can continue. As it depletes health, however, Korbanik has one final surprise for the team.
It's Draenheart.
Crap. They're screwed. No phase before this has shown us propensity for anything more than the normal data drain, which even without protect breaking the victim screws them over to the point they become helpless. If they are hit by that, they're done. And sure enough, it hits them one by one, the status of the system leaving it unable to differentiate between impaired and dead. Elk takes Kite's hit for him, leaving the Twin Blade the last alive, and the only one capable of stopping this.
I won't.
I'm not giving up!
Aura?
Mother.
Aura's destruction allows her fragments to merge with the power of the Cursed Wave, overrunning Morgana's server control and deleting her, allowing the ultimate AI to finally be born. And with Morgana gone, the central source of the system damage is removed, allowing it to finally begin its recovery and free everyone that was left comatose. As the credits roll, you see the team recovering.
You did it! I heard Aura's voice. Except she
was born, both her and Morgana. To be born, they may have had to die first. Apoptosis.
It is one of the patterns of life and death.
The world's always being changed by everyone's heart.
Is it finally over now? Is it?
No. It's just begun.
Time passes, as all things do. The Second World Network crisis passes, the servers recover, and everyone hospitalized returns to their daily lives. But what does that leave us beyond the credits and several months down the line? First of all, another game completion flag. Remember this, it will be important if you actually bother to play the PlayStation 2 versions of .hack.gu. Second, Kite and Orca meet up to begin again from where they left off, receiving a summons from Aura to return to where everything started. Oh, and Black Rose is planning a party to celebrate everything. And look at that last line. There's a quest related to it, we'll get to that later. News stories also tell that CC Corp is also getting their asses handed to them in court, and due to policies and corruption, the governmental body called the WNC is disbanding to deal with the internal problems that help shepherd the over-reliance on CC Corp systems. Orca, Black Rose, Balmug, and the Wave Masters are waiting for you in Makanu. Mistral even having had her baby in the interim time, and is giddy over the item completion event, which we'll get to in a minute. Elk has decided to build a guild around gathering aromatic grass, and Balmug gives an update on server status, and with that out of the way, the Azure Flame and the Azure Sea head to bursting past over Aquafield. In the dungeon, Aura bestows upon Kite a new Twilight bracelet, one whose data has been rewritten with the administrative authority Aura now holds to no longer require the existence of Kubia. Thus, Kite can clear out the remaining quarantine data bugs, and as long as he remains a player, any other anomalies that may propagate during the existence of the world. On the board, however, there is one piece of unfinished business. Remember those jackasses that harassed Marlowe back when they met him? Well, they have seen a suspicious cat player character, bringing everything full circle. A message from Aura gives you the location, Omega Hidden Darkside Holy Ground, and warns that there are forces that would stop the birth that is occurring there. Also, Helba sends an additional message, adding 4 new characters to the roster, adding not only herself, but also Tsukasa and Subaru, as well as Sora, but only if you freed him from Skaith's wand in Outbreak. These are not the real incarnations of Tsukasa and Subaru, however, merely data memory fragment recreations of the pair, and what all the signed data ghosts and memories were ultimately all leading up to, the pair being made into partially autonomous AI. Helba doing what Morgana failed to do with all of her clones, to an extent. Sora, as a party member, though, is complicated. He also is a collection of memory fragments gathered from the remnants of Ryu Misaki in the system, but the memories of being Sora are something Ryo does not recover after waking up from being a coma victim. That only happens approximately 7 years later, and from a far different source. Elk, having gotten the email about the birth, will be the Wave Master for the team. But it's likely he hasn't been in your party since mutation, so equipment upgrades and some power leveling to get him up to snuff may be required. Inside the dungeon of Hidden Darkside Holy Ground, you will meet a familiar figure. Maha, as she was during Sign. She disappears, descending deeper in, with the area being riddled with high-level enemies. But if you're maxed out, you should have a fair advantage with dealing with them, though some of them are still suffering from data bugs, so odds are your infection rate will be really high by the time you get to the bottom, as it is a very deep dungeon. By the amount of data bugs you need to get rid of, it's not exactly as bad as Reincarnated Purgatorial Altar, but due to how deep the dungeon is, it really would be best to avoid battle whenever possible. At the bottom, you will encounter a Guardian, called the Dawn Wanderer in this case. Though it has glitched hit points, it won't protect break. Keep at it and will evolve into a new form, Maha held within the zone previously showcasing a Twilight Ring. The Tetris Lover is likely the last of the Morgana-controlled data in the system, and it's up to the team to take it down. Your reward for destroying it? Mia's return. Sure, her memory is Swiss cheese like before, but she's back and no trace of infection or influence of the temptress within her. Elk swears to always be with Mia and help her recover her memory, going off with the AI Blade Master to scour the world once more. The goddess is in her digital heaven, and all is right with the world. We still have 3 things left to cover before we're done, though, and of course, let's start with the goblins. The goblin shtick this time is they're allowing entire parties to challenge them in their clones. So, they're idiots. Stahoni and Jinui are weak to level 4 spells, Jinui being more resistant to them. Zayan is only slowed down by them, but that difference in speed will allow your teammates to get some strong hits in on the stalled goblins. Albert is weak to sleep. Cliché. It won't last long, so you'll likely end up using 4 copies of the moon per goblin. Lastly is Martina. Remove her magic tolerance, then slam her with spells to slaughter the last of the goblins.
Amazing, Gob. I'm sure you know this is coming already, but I'll ask you one last time, Gob. Don't you want to be a goblin, Gob? Goblins are really good, Gob.
Next is the item completion event. Oh god, the item completion event. Now, if you can't tell, the damn thing is just torture. Okay, remember every item you've ever encountered in the game? If you don't have it, you need to get it again. Seriously. And no, it's not just recovery items and equipment. It also counts special loot obtained from the god statues at the bottom of dungeons, as well as grunty food and virus cores. There are over 700 items you need to acquire all over again. The record keepers for the event only count items in your current inventory or the Elf's Haven as well, so you can't even use what you might have given to your allies as proof of you collecting the items before. Fortunately, they are only looking for common items, so rare weapons and stat enhancement books are not required to track down again. So you could just junk them if you didn't want the pedigree of having all the rare items in the game. Trading with the various NPCs and buying what is commonly available at shopkeepers does put a fair dent in the list, but it only accounts for about 300 of them, with there still being around 400 items you would need to recover from the past dungeons to clear it. Full disclosure, when I originally did the IMOQ reviews in 2012 and 2013, I didn't even bother with this, as it simply is that tedious to go and try and track down every item in this game, as really, there's just that many of them. And I'm glad that GU made their item completion event far easier by allowing you to rank it up simply by playing through the events of it normally, with rare items and the rare rogue missing item not being a big deal as long as you're paying attention. But because I wanted the absolute perfect street cred for my devotion to this franchise, as if I hadn't earned it already, yeah, for these remastered reviews, I went and did it, adding approximately 50 hours of additional playtime to do this, and tracked down every freaking weapon, armor piece, spell scroll, consumable, grunty food, and treasure item in the game. But it is somewhat easy to screw yourself over and lock yourself out of being able to complete it in the IMOQ incarnation. On top of there being items exclusive to upgrading through the Mist Springs, ones that can only be gotten as trade items for other players, so actually don't do any trades this time around, and ones that are only gotten at random from chests, 6 of the common weapons needed to complete the list are exclusive to god statues in these listed areas. Though I often found multiple copies of Bayan in high-level treasure chests as well, so that might not be true for the others if you end up with no other option. But unlike rare items and stat books that are available from locked-in event areas, you are not guaranteed to get them from those god statues. Hell, since I hadn't done this quest in 15 years, I actually forgot some details about this no one on the internet remembers to mention at all in any guide about the game. These 6 areas have the only god statues that I'm aware of that reset themselves after you leave a dungeon, and they then drop at freaking random from them. I honestly thought I'd lost my chance entirely at it when after a couple save resets, the Evil Eye Sword and Omega Soaring Sky Hopeless Cat Market hadn't dropped, until I by chance decided to check the other treasure chest in the off chance it might have been an environmental one, and found the statue had reset. Like I said, it's been 15 years since I last did this, And no one has ever mentioned this peculiarity of these regions' special condition at all. So I honestly didn't remember they did this, or if any other god statue did as well, as I usually don't go searching for them in the random areas. But if anything, that just goes to show that if you're going to do the item completion event for whatever maddening reason, make sure you get the last 6 weapons on each class's list first, and then don't touch them otherwise until you can start registering them as part of the event in the post-game, as they, and losing the chance at the ones you can easily trade from companions, are the biggest pain to deal with, and it is not easy to obtain spare copies of them at all, some of which you just can't. As with the exception to these last 4 to 6 items, you can get everything else through throwing stuff into the mist springs or trading with the game's NPCs. Again, as I keep stressing, don't trade with anyone in this game until the post-game if you can help it. So otherwise, if you have an item on the list not filled in, then find a copy of an item that's close to near where it is in the list and either downgrade or upgrade that one to then get the one you're missing. Sometimes that is faster and easier than trying to track it down via treasure chests or data drains. But be careful about overdoing that, as despite the vast volumes of areas you have access to by Quarantine's End, there is still only a finite number of mist springs you can upgrade weapons with. But honestly, even among the .hack fandom's obnoxious IMOQ purists that only played these games, I can't name any single person I have ever met that's part of the .hack fandom that has ever even tried to finish the item completion event. Not a single one. The only other people I'm sure that did is the guy who wrote the online guide to get other people through it, and the one who posted screenshots of its completion on the .hack wiki. I'm sure more are out there, and if you're one who has and you've been following these videos, honest kudos to you in doing so. But when even the purists who obsess over solely this game series don't want to do this final quest line, yeah, that should tell you a lot about how tedious it is. Say what you will about the repetitious grind for epic and legendary items in World of Warcraft's dungeons and raids can be, especially if you're trying for Thunder Fury Blessed Blade of the Windseeker. At least even if you don't end up getting what you're after, you aren't locked out of getting it permanently if the game's RNG drop rates screw you over. And at least you can save the cosmetic appearances of that stuff now if you get it. Which brings us to the love triangle. I brought this up during Outbreak, but the game's writers thought to bring up the Ryoko thing again. It only unlocks once you have full friendship with both Black Rose and Ryoko. I went over the infection rating stuff way back in Infection, but if you need a refresher, keep the people you want to raise affection with in your party to raise it, or give them things. If you're doing the item completion event, you will have a multitude of junk to shove off on your NPC party members. Once the friendship for both is maxed out, the girls will send you separate emails, both of them wanting to go to the same area, Omega Raging facing Mirror's Virgin. Kite, being a man, missed the warning signs right then and there. Guess what he does? Yep, it's a menage a trois, which I really am using out of context to get this point across. Obviously, neither are happy that their alone time with the Azure Flame has been preempted, and are thus antagonistic towards each other and him. In the dungeon, the pair even start fighting over which direction to take, even when the use of a Fairy's Orb reveals they would both lead to the same destination. Eventually, the pair, in what I assume to be an amusing cinematic, leave Kite with an ultimatum and go off on their own. And I really feel like this is an overused trope. Girls at their throats break their argument with the opinion of a guy, the guy says something stupid, and either the girls bond over the guy being stupid, or the lot all go their separate ways. If you've been following Black Rose's directions, then the final statue will have the heavy blade weapon, the Sunfang, and add a few new movies to the roster. So, with everything in the games done, what does that leave us with afterwards? The .hack games are an entertaining, if albeit due to their age, frustrating foursome of role-playing games. The characters each have unique evolutions in development, though nowhere as much as the sequel series GU has. The classes allow for a modicum of strategy in who you use when, even though it's likely to just be Black Rose and one of the Wave Masters most of the time. The story, even with holes and leaps in logic, is entertaining, and no one seen or interacted in the games is actually evil, my own issues with a certain axeman notwithstanding, and come across once more as more real characters than a lot of games pull off. Saints and sinners, lovers and fighters, enthusiasts and escapists, jackasses and morons. But as I said in Outbreak, many of the characters aren't needed for any purpose within the game world, as the story doesn't make them important or involved characters and places no effort in making them relevant, only later material trying to do that retroactively in a variety of different ways with the lore. My point is, despite its dated gameplay, it simulates a lot of the human experience without the foibles of time constraints and location limitations interpersonal interaction can hold. For those who like a single-player experience to an MMO, it's a good alternative, in that at least there's a defined ending to it aside from, hey, my level's maxed until the next expansion. Let's waste time gathering resources to do all the stuff I couldn't do when I was starting out because the in-game currency made it too expensive. Admittedly, buying all 4 games is now very pricey, but at least the subsequent volumes after Infection came out in short order over the course of a year originally. Unfortunately, now it's near impossible to get the games due to their value skyrocketing in the last decade, whereas even when I did these reviews originally 7 years ago, they were mostly fair in cost. On to cons. The battle system is a pain, only fixed by overleveling your characters so they can breeze through story events. And even sometimes the enemy monster groupings can make it impossible to overcome. There's a few times I almost died, not because I did anything wrong, but enemy monsters just cast so many spells over top of one another that it completely locked out character actions. That is not good battle design, and flaws like that were not appreciated, but also fortunately not repeated in the sequel series, especially with how dull and repetitive it can be to turn off player interest. And sometimes the side quest requisites can be so convoluted you're not sure what the hell you're supposed to do to kill a goblin or raise anything other than a noble grunty. And without a guidebook, there's no way anyone would have figured out the memory events, or really what they were referencing if one had happened to not watch Sign. Hell, a bunch of the extra areas I pointed out were hidden in the OVA DVDs as Easter eggs, or planted in magazines which had content even tangentially related to the franchise, that were only available when the games were originally released in Japan. Fortunately, the internet is a neurotic bunch, so all the hidden areas have since been revealed and recorded by the good people at GameFAQs, and that's why I placed as many as I could in this review to tip people off to them and have a historical archive of them. But a lot of the early players wouldn't have known about them unless they specifically looked for the guides. And with the way the games play out, if you didn't know to go for them, it's something that is easily missed, and why I really placed emphasis on listing as many as I could. Though back to the positives, this is one of the first games I can really think of that had any type of character customization available, with the various equipments, weapons, and spell scrolls, but you're sadly locked to solely playing as Kite, so you miss out on directly controlling 5 of the 6 character classes, which always remains disappointing. What's also disappointing is I kept having to remind people that Morgana is the big bad in all of this. I mean, it is so easy to forget she exists aside from the sparse time she is referenced and the events of Sign, but she plays no tangible role as an antagonist at any other point, simply seeing her minions do things instead of a tangible representation of her malice or growing insanity, beyond the degradation of the system. Without context from Sign, what's breaking in the system has no tangible existence beyond the phases that are just fragments of herself. And yeah, she's omnipresent and all, as by all technicalities, she is the game system, but I really wish she had a face, even if it was only one glimpse through the cracking corpse of Korbanik, or an extended scene where she forces the change of Mia into Maha the Temptress. I know that every story has to have a defined enemy, and it's really stupid when the manga 4X actually gives her a face, but I would like to put one to the being who did all the damage beginning with Lycoris and Alberio in the novel AI Buster. But that brings us to the big flaw in all of Sign and IMOQ, and why fans who proclaim it superior to the sequel GU are missing something significant. In the first era of the franchise, what it had going for it was solely the mystery of this setting, how these players became trapped and rendered comatose, the Force keeping them from recovering, and what virus was devastating the real world on top of that of a video game. Once the mystery, and the way to get the victims freed, was solved, it didn't have anything else to give, as so much had been put on the back burner for that mystery, including the actualization of the cast as tangible people worth coming back to. Knowing the answers to the mysteries robs IMOQ of much of its mystique, and the characters in and of themselves, while beloved by the fandom, are not strong, deep, or developed enough to hold it up on their own. With few of them potentially having that capacity, but that number barely breaking a dozen in between Sign and the original games. In the 15th anniversary polls for the franchise, Only Tsukasa, Mistral, and Mia made it into the top 3 in their respective categories to represent the first era. Aura came in 5th for the women, and Kite fell in 4th for the men, to be followed by Alberio from AI Buster. Black Rose, while battling solely Elk as having the strongest character arc for the IMOQ games, didn't even rank among them. And only 3 characters in this poll that ended up in the top 10 for the franchise were from this era, as no matter how much various fans may like it, in comparison to far stronger, developed and actualized characters down the line and in .hacks related media, only the ones with the strongest forged connections were able to compete, as something Kazunori Ito is not strong at, ironically, is the writing and development of characters within a story. And with neither the cast nor an engaging story drawing you back to play it again and again, with time it has suffered, and IMOQ can now come off as a rather dated series, and only notable because of the franchise that continued around it. Now that doesn't dismiss the value to the IMOQ quadrology, as it and Sign provide the central foundation by which the rest of the franchise builds itself by introducing its core concepts and lore. But that's all it really does when looking back at the franchise as a whole, as later material does a lot of what it did so much better. Tatsuya Hamazaki took what Kazunori Ito started here and ran with it farther as giving it narrative and thematic depth. But he wouldn't have been able to do that without Ito's primary work. CyberConnect would not have learned to not make the same mistakes again in following products had they not been made here first, as they are dedicated to providing positive player experiences and accepting that feedback, both good and badly received, so their later products can be improved. And so GU wouldn't have turned out as well as it did had this not been here first. I unrepentantly love GU. I view it as better than IMOQ. I spent 20 videos in 2014 and 2015 explaining why that is. Wanting to discuss GU was why I started this entire retrospective to begin with in 2012. But it doesn't diminish the importance nor the groundwork IMOQ laid down. And that's why I think it still remains important. I just hate the fans that bash GU just because it's not IMOQ, who refuse to see the flaws GU sought to correct, and the critics of the franchise that just see more of the same. But sadly, due to the passage of time, IMOQ is just hard to get to play. I understand why many just wouldn't see the value in doing so. But it is still important to know what it did, and what popularity it brought to even give the rest of the franchise a chance. If you can get a chance to play, or even support efforts to get a remastered version of the game made, or its release onto the PlayStation Network even in its current SD form, and that would be appreciated by us .hackers out there who want that exact thing to come to pass. But in the meantime, there's still a few parts left to this era that need to be rounded out, so stick around as next we'll be tackling the last Liminality disc, and what part my inner crew played, and allowing the battle against Morgana to come to the conclusion it did.